Well, good morning. I'm glad that you are here today as we celebrate resurrection. We'll be in Luke 24 in a moment. If you have your Bibles and want to turn there. The title of our sermon today is, Then Their Eyes Were Opened. Now, as we begin, I have a few assumptions about all of you. And the first assumption is when the idea of resurrection comes about, there's probably a few different responses that we have. So I chose 3 responses that I think fit probably the majority of us, and possibly you find yourself somewhere in the middle. So here is one response you might have to the resurrection. Anyone have one of those in their household? My son was up at 5:06, he told me this morning. This is my son, ready for Easter. So this is one response that you might have thinking about resurrection. And then here is a second response. And for some of you, I know this looks bad. You're like, wait, yawning about the resurrection? But the truth is you have sat in multiple Resurrection Sunday services. You know the story of Jesus rising from the dead. And the freshness of it, the depth of it, it's just not there for you because the story's been told. You've heard it before. You know the details. You know the ending to the story. It's like watching a movie for the 25th time. You know the words, you can quote lines, you know where the thing is going. And so it's like soda that's been opened and sat in your refrigerator for 2 weeks or for 2 years. It's gone stale, it's gone flat. So for some of you, you're like, all right, I know this is an important moment for me, for the church, for life, for the world, but the vitality and the freshness of it, it seems to have gone from your life a bit. Now, here's a third possible response you might have. And I think this is a common response. It's like, really, we're going to talk about a guy rising from the dead? Like, that stuff just doesn't happen. I can talk about some of the other things in the Bible, and okay, that's fine, that makes sense. But whenever we talk about resurrection, whenever we talk about someone who was dead, crucified, and then coming back 3 days later, rising to life, you're like, wait, hold on a second here. You're asking me to check my brain at the door before I come and sit in these seats. So I think we can have any of these 3 or varying responses to the resurrection. And what I was going to do, actually, and talking about this particular response, let me just say this: spooky action at a distance. If you don't know what that is, Google it. And I was going to get into it a little bit, but then I realized that we have a quantum physicist here in our presence, and I thought if I was to talk about quantum physics and spooky action at a distance and the mysteriousness of our universe, I might get some of the details wrong, and then I would have that quantum physicist calling me, texting me, emailing me for the next 3 weeks like, hey Dave, you should stay in your lane. But here's one thing I know about spooky action at a distance, and it's that the universe is a lot more mysterious than we often give it credit for. There are things that happen in our world that are unexplainable, that make no sense. Things in our world that defy our understanding. You can't wrap your head around it, but yet it exists and it happens. And yet you do not know why, and even really smart people can't explain why certain things happen. So my first assumption is that you're all in a different place when it comes to resurrection and talking about the resurrection. But I have another assumption. And here is the assumption that I want to make. My second assumption about all of you beautiful people sitting here this morning, April 20th, 2025, we all share common longings. So we're here this morning and we all need something a little bit different. So the resurrection, it's universal, but it's particular to each one of our stories. It's universal, and what we're going to talk about in the sense that we all have these common longings, and here's one longing that I believe we're all here looking for. And I'll call it longing for spring renewal. There's areas in our lives that have gone dark. There's areas in our lives that have gone numb, that have died. And somewhere deep within our heart, and sometimes it's hard to access that place, especially the longer those places have been numb for, it's hard to get there and to feel that. But the truth is, we're all looking for renewal somewhere in our lives. I cut this from my hydrangea bush this morning. And this is what happens to a hydrangea bush over the winter. The beautiful flower that existed and all the different colors that might exist on a hydrangea, well, the flower withers and it dies. And my guess is for some of you here this morning, there's some areas in your life that feel like this withered flower. And your hope is that somehow, in some way, new life would come back into existence for you. That in some way, there would be some spring renewal. I took this graph, this chart, earlier in the week, and this is a temperature chart of the how warm it's been over the past week and a half or so. And sometimes I think in our lives, we feel like this spring weather. Where if you notice, earlier in the month, the 3rd and the 4th, look how high that temperature was. I mean, we were pushing 80. I know yesterday we were there also. But earlier in the month, we were right here. 70, 72? It felt great. We got outside. We felt like we were thawing from the winter frost. We're like, oh, this is amazing. Spring is here. But then what happened a couple days later? I mean, look at this, the 12th right here. The high barely reached the average low. And I think that's often how it goes with renewal. That's how it goes with life as well. Those areas that have gone numb and dark, that seem to have died, that have gone hopeless, well, every once in a while we catch a glimpse of hope. We have a feeling, but then that hope, something else happens, and that hope goes dark again. And it's like our temperature over the past week and a half or so. You're up, you're down, you're all over the place, waiting, hoping that eventually spring will arrive and then summer after it. I took this picture of a rose bush in our yard, and if you notice, the leaves, the flowers are starting to pop ever so slightly, because that is the promise of spring. Winter comes, and we all have our own winter. But the truth is, spring is always around the corner. It may take a while to get there. You may have some starts where things feel like you're getting there, and then winter feels like it's coming back with a vengeance again. But spring is always after winter. It's the same about resurrection. The pattern of the seasons is the pattern of life. And after winter, after death, comes new life, new hope, resurrection. Now, I mentioned we'll be in Luke chapter 24. Let's explore this idea of resurrection and how to access it in our lives, because that's what you want. You don't want to just hear about resurrection. You don't want to know and memorize the story. You want to experience it, because you are longing for spring renewal, or shall we say, resurrection renewal. Anyone there this morning? You're like, yes, please, I could use some resurrection in my life. I don't want to just hear the story. I don't want to read it. I don't want another church service telling me what to believe. I want to actually feel and experience the power of resurrection in my life this morning. Luke 24, verse 13, where we find ourselves in the story. Jesus has died. He's been in the tomb. All of his disciples are depressed. They have lost hope because this wasn't how it was supposed to go. The person you're following, the person that you were looking to for renewal, has died on a cross. So of course, all your dreams, everything that you were hoping for, you put it all on black. You were at the horse race, you took all your money and you put it on, I don't know, what's a good horse name? Someone got a good horse name?
Seabiscuit.
Seabiscuit? That one's been done. What else do we got here?
Rusty.
Rusty? Rusty. All right, let's call it Rusty. You put all your money on Rusty, but Rusty has come up lame. And so then Seabiscuit won again. This is where we are in the story, a moment of bleakness, darkness. Now, that same day, two of them, talking about disciples of Jesus, they were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. This means these disciples are going home. Their dreams ended in Jerusalem. They are now going home. They were talking with each other about everything that had happened. As they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them, but they were kept from recognizing him. Jesus asked them, "What are you discussing together as you walk along?" They stood still, their faces downcast. One of them, named Cleopas, asked him, "Are you the only one visiting Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened there in these days?" They're incredulous about this. Like, you don't know what just happened? Like, have you been living under a rock? Do you not have TikTok? Have you not gone on Instagram? Like, seriously, how have you missed the news? So Jesus says, "What things?" And then I found the perfect picture to illustrate how the disciples tried explaining to Jesus about everything that has just transpired. And Jesus is there with his cup of coffee like, wait a second, what? The disciples are trying to explain it all. They have their charts, their graphs, their pictures. They have it all there on the wall. And Jesus is like, whoa, I'm not so sure. And then Jesus tries to explain to them, but of course, they don't get it. Then a little bit later, as they approached the village to which they were going, Jesus continued on as if he were going farther. But they urged him strongly, "Stay with us. It's nearly evening. The day is almost over." So Jesus went to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, gave thanks, broke it, and began to give it to them. Then their eyes were opened. What's our sermon title? Then their eyes were open. Any idea where I got the sermon title from yet? Then their eyes were open in that moment. They recognized him, and he disappeared from their sight. They're like, wait a second, whoa, where did he go? We just recognized him, now he's disappearing again? Like, what's up with that? These disciples and all of us, we know how the world works. The longer we're in the world, the more we understand how the whole thing works. And the truth is, dying on a cross is not the way to victory. We all know the cross is a sign of defeat. We know death, well, that's the end. When a dream dies, that's it. It's over. We and the disciples, we know how the world works. There's a certain way in which things happen, and the truth is, things don't deviate from those truths. So for the disciples, when Jesus died on the cross, well, the way in which their world worked is, it's over. That's it. All hope is gone. It's like whenever you go into one of those haunted houses, abandon all hope, ye who enter into here. This was what was rolling through their mind at this point in the story, because we've all been there before. And we know the ending. And that's it. There is no new beginning after death. There is no hope after being defeated on a cross. Now, I came across this quote earlier this week. It's from a book, Recovering the Scandal of the Cross. And for me, as I read this, everything just fell into place for me, for this sermon, for our understanding of resurrection, for this story that we have in Luke. And here's the quote: "The story the disciples had learned to tell and to live would not allow, specifically, victory through death." The disciples were telling a particular story. This is the wisdom of how the world works. Because they were confined to that story, anything that appeared outside of those lines, well, no, it can't happen that way. It doesn't work that way. There was a story that their lives were telling. There's a story that they were believing, and they refused. They weren't able to see anything beyond that story that had been cemented into their brain, which then, for us, raises the question, well, what story is your life living and telling? Are there any stories and you've confined yourself to these stories? There's a certain box that you're living in, and anything that doesn't fit inside that box, well, you're unwilling to go there. You know how the whole thing works, and you have a story to prove it because it's happened in the past, been there, done that, and so you have a dominant story that your life is telling, and there's nothing that could happen outside of that storyline. Or what about this? What is the story that is shaping your belief about the best way to live? The disciples had a story that they were living with. And this is really difficult because the disciples had been living with Jesus for 3 years. They've been walking with Jesus, and yet they still had this story that said death is the end. They still had this story that said, well, God can't do anything beyond a cross. God is confined to the conventional way in which the world works. So I'll ask you again, what is the story that your life is living and telling? In any way, have you confined yourself? In any way, have you confined the power of God in your life? The power of God at work in the world around you? Is there any way in which you have diminished, in which you have minimized the power of the Spirit that is active and at work in the world around us? The disciples did it. And so they were unable to recognize Jesus because their story would not allow for the unexpected. Their story would not allow for resurrection. And then we're told, what's the line? I hope you remember it by next Sunday. If anyone asks you, what did you talk about Resurrection Sunday? Your answer is going to be what? Now, a little bit later in the story, Jesus is with a few other disciples, and here's what we read in Luke 24:45. Then Jesus opened their minds. There's that idea again. He expanded their minds. First, he helped disciples see what's always been there, but they were too blind to see. They were unable to see. And then, in a very similar way, the same Greek word is used here, he expands their minds. He expands their story. He tells them, you've been living with too confining of a story. So he opened their minds to see what has been true all along. The disciples, like some of us do from time to time, they were stuck in an old story, and they couldn't see the new. You ever find yourself there before? You're stuck in one particular way of viewing the world, and you're unable to see anything new. You're unable to see the hope that's been there all along, but because you're stuck in this old way, you're in a rut. I remember one time, I'm remembering this because I have one of my friends who used to work with me in youth group, and we were on a ski trip one time, and we got our church van stuck in the snow, and we had to get out and try to push the van out of the snow. But every time you press the gas, you ever been there before? Like you're in the mud or you're in snow, you press the gas and the tires just keep spinning and you sink lower and lower into the snow. That's some of you today. You're in a rut and you're spinning your wheels and you're just sinking lower and lower into the mud, and you're unable to see the good. You're unable to see the new and the hopeful. You're unable to see the power of resurrection that is right there, that's been there all along, the new that God is desiring to birth in you and through you. See, the disciples on their road, on their walk to Emmaus, what Luke tells us, they were downcast. Where are your eyes pointed when you're downcast? Your eyes are down. So of course, if you're walking on a street and someone comes up to you and is like, hey, what's going on? You're unable to recognize the presence that's been walking with you all those miles because your eyes are pointed down at the ground instead of up, looking around with the sense that something new could be happening in this very moment. The disciples, they had lost hope, they had lost meaning, they had lost purpose. This is why they are going home. Everything that they had stepped out in courage for, that they were hoping and trusting and believing in, it came crashing down. So they went home for mom's spaghetti and meatballs because they needed comfort. You know what I discovered this week? Ever hear of the TV station Cozy? I had never heard of that before, and earlier in the week, I was exhausted. I turned the TV on, which I never do, and King of Queens was on. And I noticed, whoa, this is Cozy. I was like, this makes sense. This makes me feel good. I haven't watched the show in years, but it reminds me of simpler times when everything was easy, cozy, comfortable. That's what the disciples are looking for. They want to go home, forget Netflix and chill. They want cozy and chill. But then we're told their eyes were opened, because this is the power of resurrection. Resurrection restores. It restores hope. It restores purpose. Resurrection comes rushing in the most unexpected way. The Spirit comes rushing into your life and offers a new story to live. A new story to tell. Now, let's make this really practical for us. Let's answer the question, how do you open your eyes to resurrection? Because that's what you're all looking for. This all sounds great, but how do we open our eyes to resurrection? Now, this word open that we've been looking at, in Jewish tradition, the opening of the eyes or mind, it was seen as a divine act. In other words, you need a little divine help in order to experience and to have your eyes open to resurrection. This is a gift of God. This is a gift that God is offering to us. Notice, it was Jesus who helped open their eyes, open their minds. This is a gift of the Spirit. Now, whenever we go on a road trip, I always have to make sure that I print a couple of these scavenger hunt road maps out. Otherwise, my kids within 5 minutes will be completely bored, and they will start asking, how long till we get there? It might be a 4-hour trip or 5 minutes into it, and they're already asking, you know what I'm talking about? You ever been there before? And you're like, my goodness, let's turn this thing around. Always thought it would never be that person, and it's like, yeah, I'm going to turn the car around. We're done. But these scavenger hunts, they help a little bit because they keep the kids occupied for at least 15 minutes. So it's only 3 hours and 45 minutes of asking how long till we get there. Can we have a bathroom break? No. Go to sleep. Who's picking the music for this one? Now, the way in which this scavenger hunt roadmap works, if you've never done one of these before, if you need a little refresher, you have to have your eyes open. You have to be looking around. You have to be looking at everything. Because when you're going down the highway, it could be very easy to miss the horse that's on the side over there. And with both of my kids in the back, there might be a horse on the left-hand side, which is Reese's side. And we might say, hey, there's a horse on that side. Reese might see it. But then Kit, being on the right-hand side, she doesn't see it. And she gets really, really angry when that happens. Or if it's the other way around, he gets angry too. So they are both, same deal here. But you have to be quick. And you have to be looking. And if your eyes are downcast, if you're looking down, if you're not paying attention to all that's around you, you might miss all these images that are on the scavenger hunt. So you need to be constantly looking around. You have to do your part to have your eyes opened to the new and to what's happening around you. Here's a picture of an ancient road. Looks kind of like a modern road somewhere off in the wilderness. Dirt looks the same today than it did 2,000 years ago. Now, the disciples are going from Jerusalem to Emmaus. They're on a road. They're, little disclaimer here, there were no cars in the world back then. If they were alive today, if the story took place today, they would have been in their, I don't know, Fiat or whatever they would have been driving around in. They would have driven home. So the disciples are in the middle of a normal, ordinary event. They're going home. And they're having a conversation. Two friends talking to each other. Have you ever experienced this before? Maybe you're driving home. Maybe you're driving somewhere. You have a friend, someone else with you in the car, and you're talking. Well, this is the moment when Jesus showed up. In the normal. The ordinary. They weren't at church. They weren't in the temple. They weren't reading their Bibles. They were just simply doing life. For today, we could equate it to they were driving in their car. They were texting someone. Jesus comes to them in the midst of the ordinary, the normal. If we don't have our eyes open, it can be very easy to miss the invitation of the Spirit. So how do you access resurrection? Well, number one, you have to be paying attention. And you have to have your eyes open to all that's happening around you. Because later in the story, when Jesus breaks bread, when he's having a meal, this is when their eyes were open. Because think about it. You're on a road, you're downcast, you're looking down. But now as you're sharing a meal with someone, where are your eyes? They're up. Their eyes are up. So it was in that moment, sharing a meal, as their perspective shifted, that they were able to recognize the resurrected Christ that had been with them all along. And then after Jesus disappears, after he's transported away by Geordie LaForge, this is now what they say. They asked each other, were not our hearts burning within us? I love that phrase. You ever feel something bubbling up within you? And sometimes you just dismiss it. And it's not just indigestion. You know what I mean? You know the difference between the two? There's something that you feel within you. You feel your pulse quicken a little bit. It's like hope is starting to rise within you. There's some new life that you just feel it in your bones. This is what the disciples were experiencing. Were not our hearts burning? Why didn't we recognize it? Why did we push that feeling down? The first way to access resurrection is to be paying attention to what's around you and what you're feeling within you. Because that sense of hope that's rising up, that quickening of your pulse, is an invitation of the Spirit. It's an invitation of God to experience the power of the new and of new hope being birthed within you. So the invitation to see is always around. And then here's a second way to access resurrection. You ask yourself this question: where do I need resurrection right now? Remember, I mentioned early on, we're all looking for renewal. But we all need renewal in different ways, because all of our stories are particular to us. One of the interesting things about the gospel accounts of the resurrection is that Jesus appeared differently, in different ways, to each of his disciples, because they all needed something different. And they all experienced God differently. So how do you access resurrection? You ask yourself, well, where do I need resurrection in my life? Where is there something that has died, that has gone numb, and I need the Spirit to come in and to breathe fresh life into that area? Because I believe that is the area where God is working right now in your life. So first, you pay attention. Second, you ask yourself, where do I need the power of resurrection? And then I'll offer a third way to experience and access resurrection. It's right here. The breaking of the bread and the pouring of the cup. Communion, Eucharist, which we will celebrate together in a moment. Now, when I was a little before middle school, I used to play baseball. And I was having trouble hitting the ball. And I was like, well, of course it just can't be me. I'm a better baseball player than this. My parents took me to an eye doctor to have my eyes checked. Sure enough, I needed contact lenses. That was the only reason why I couldn't hit the ball, of course. Well, after I went and I got contact lenses, I started hitting the ball better, because I could actually see the ball. Instead of this blurry white thing coming at me, well, now everything came into focus a bit more clearly. For the disciples, the lens through which they were viewing the world was the lens of the cross. Death is the end. And the way in which the world works is that it's the more powerful, it's the stronger who get to claim victory. If you want success in the world, well, you just need to be quicker and more powerful and stronger. Maybe for some of us, the story that we're believing is someone has hurt us. Maybe we've been stabbed in the back before, and we're going to hold on to our bitterness. We're going to hold on to our unforgiveness because what they did hurt so much. And so the lens, the story that we are viewing our lives through is one of getting even, proving them wrong. And what happens is when this becomes the dominant lens, we become entrenched in that way of being, and we can't begin to believe that there might be a better way to live, that there might be a better way to experience the power of the new, the power of resurrection. So we come to this ritual. And essentially, what this ancient ritual is, we talked about this a bit on Friday, it's this way for us to remember the way of Jesus. And to once again entrust ourselves to Jesus and to his way of living in the world. We come to this ritual, and it's like we're putting on new contacts. We're giving ourselves a new story through which to see our lives. And as we come to the table, which we will in a moment, we take the bread, we take the cup, and we remind ourselves, or maybe it's not even a reminder, But what we're doing, we're entrusting ourselves to this way of living, a way of love, a way of forgiveness, a way of grace. And maybe we're not all quite there yet, but it's like you're going into a pool and you can come forward, but it's like you're dipping one toe into the pool because you're not quite sure if you really want this way of living, because you've been holding on to this one story for so long. And the truth is, it's really hard to get rid of those old stories. But we come to the table with the hope that if we were to follow the example of Jesus, if we were to entrust our lives to this Jesus, well, then maybe we could experience some renewal. And maybe we could experience some hope and resurrection to the places in our lives where we desperately need resurrection and healing. So my prayer for you as you come forward here in a moment is that once again you would entrust your whole self to Jesus, to his grace, his mercy, forgiveness, and love that is upon you. If there's any story that speaks otherwise, that you're telling yourself, may you leave that story behind. And as you come forward and take the bread and the cup, may you trade out any confining stories of the power of the Spirit. And may you come to believe and trust a new story. A story that offers hope, renewal, and resurrection. And as you come forward, may you have your eyes open, and may they always be open to the resurrected Christ that walks with you every step you take. The presence of the resurrected Christ that is with you in every conversation, in every place you go. May you find your eyes being opened to that reality this morning.